Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Agent Moreno. I'm with the United States Border Patrol. Um, Ms. Flume had invited me to join your meeting here about yeah, it's probably close to a month, at least a month ago. So yeah, I'm just here to answer any questions and be a part of your discussion today. So if there's anything in particular that you folks would like to know about the Border Patrol here in San Diego sector, I'm here to answer questions. And I did do a little bit of research about your guys' institution, but please feel free to carry on as if I was not here. And if there's anything, again, that I can be of assistance with, then that is why I am here.
Okay. Well, I'll start. Get you thinking about this, but in the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, we've had a lot more people crossing the border. And are they all coming in with CBP1, or are they coming between the ports? Or I guess Biden said that people who came between the ports of entry would be deported right away. That doesn't seem to be happening, right? Or is it?
So that's a great question. So make sure my microphone is on. Yeah, so that's a great question. So the statistics that we keep are specific to the United States Border Patrol. And the United States Border Patrol, what we do here in San Diego sector is patrol in between the ports of entry. That's what the United States Border Patrol does on a national level. Here in San Diego sector, we're responsible for 60 linear miles of border that start at the Pacific Ocean and head all the way out east to the Imperial Valley. Um, and so to answer your question, Ms. Flume, the folks that we apprehend here in San Diego sector are apprehended out in the field, rescued at times, and then taken back to one of our processing centers. Um, there they are fed, they are medically evaluated, and they are housed. We have a certain time frame that we're allowed to keep these folks in our custody. So it's important for us that we process these folks as expeditiously as possible. Every single individual is more than likely going to have a different processing pathway. When they arrive at the processing center, they will be fingerprinted. Their picture will be taken and ran through numerous databases. And as I stated earlier, they'll be medically evaluated and fed. So depending on what the person is claiming, whether they are fleeing persecution from their country of origin, whether they're an economic migrant who are here to seek a better life for themselves, or whatever the case may be, every single one of those people are going to have a different processing pathway. Our job is to process them, make sure that we run their fingerprints, that they aren't known criminals. In the event that they are, then we are able to charge them with, depending on their criminal history and some other criteria, we are able to charge them with entry without inspection into the country, which is a misdemeanor violation. A re-entry after a prior removal is a felony. So these folks are being processed. They are, depending again on their disposition, they are either being held in a detention center or they're being set up with a notice to appear, and at times are being released on their own recognizance.
Okay, so those who claim
And
asylum.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ms. Flynn, and your question was
Recording in
twofold.
progress.
Sorry, your question was twofold. So we account for everything that happens in between the ports of entry. The folks that present themselves, they utilize the CBP1 app and present themselves at a port of entry. Those apprehensions, those statistics, which I do have some of for again for
Recording
the
in progress.
Sorry.
It's all right. Those folks that are utilizing the CBP1 app and that do present themselves through the port of entry, the statistic for those folks are kept with the Office of Field Operations. Those folks are the men and women in blue that work at the airports, seaports, and land ports. So I would have to defer to them in terms of any statistics that are kept by them for regarding those entries or apprehensions that are made at the port of entry. But I can only attest to what happens in between the ports.
Okay, so in between the borders, those who claim asylum, fleeing persecution, or an economic migrant, they're generally allowed in unless they have a criminal background.
Yes.
Okay. And so then how long do they stay in your facility before you take them to Iris? Now you're taking them to Iris Street, right?
Irish Trolley Station is
Yeah, yeah, right.
Um, it depends. Again, it depends on their processing pathway, but I think generally what we're averaging right now is anywhere between, I think it's 12 to 24 hours that they're in our custody.
Okay.
And I did want to note that last fiscal year on a national level, we apprehended over 2 million people. And of those 2 million people, 15,000 of those had some sort of criminal history, serious criminal history at that. And that,
Sorry, how many? 200,000?
Out of the 2 million encounters that took place in fiscal year 2023,
yeah.
Over 15,000 of those had some sort of serious criminal history. And that's a national number. You can look that up on cbp.gov. Those are official national numbers.
Okay. All right. So then people are just, they've had one meal with you probably, and
Say that again.
they get one meal or more from you.
These folks get fed 3 times a day. They get 3 meals.
Yeah, okay. All right.
And they're able to, and our processing center is an amazing facility. It has showers. There are privacy rooms in the event that a mother is nursing. They have, again, we have medical staff there. There's an area where children can play. I mean, it's a very, I don't know if state of the art is the right term, but it's a very nice facility that we utilize to house these folks. So.
Okay. If a family comes in or a couple comes in, are men separated from women?
So we try to legitimize every single family unit, or at least every single group of individuals that are claiming to be a family unit. There are instances where folks aren't married, or where children have different last names than the adults that they're with. And it's important for us, I think, just from a public safety standpoint, to ensure that we are thoroughly vetting these folks when we are able to, and to ensure that the children do belong to these adults, to these family units. In the past, we have seen where children were utilized on numerous occasions. There's a term out there that we use. It's called, these children were being recycled. They were being used to come into the United States with different family units, or as part of different family units. And it was the same children agents caught on to that and recognized that these were the same children that were being utilized. So again, from a public safety standpoint, and really from a humanitarian standpoint, it's important that we thoroughly vet these women and these children and the adult males as well, to make sure that they are in fact who they say they are. If they say that they're the father of the children that they may have, or the mother, it's important for us to ensure that we verify that what they are claiming is true.
But the children stay, right?
No, if there is a family unit that comes together, the children are going to, if let's say a mom comes in with 2 children, and we're able to legitimize that family unit, then
they stay together.
They stay together, and then depending on the processing pathway, then they move along in the immigration process together.
If you have a child you can't prove that the adult with them is a parent, then you keep the child?
I believe they are eventually turned over to the custody of, I think it might be either the state, or I'd have to get back to you on exactly who it is currently that takes custody of the children. Yeah, but they don't stay in Border Patrol custody.
Okay. All right. But if a couple comes in, do you separate men from women?
Not if they're married. I mean, if a family unit's a family unit, and there are instances where people are separated. If I come in with a female and I say that she's my wife, and we're not a family unit, we're not legally married, then we're not legally married.
Okay,
so you don't consider what's it called? They live to, a lot of families I worked with as a social worker years ago in Central America, Mexico, live together, but they, natural, they don't get married, they don't have papers, so they're not considered a couple. They could be together 20 years, have a bunch of kids.
It depends. Everything's going to be on a case by case basis, but it is possible that they bring forth some sort of documentation proving that what is the term? I'm drawing a blank, but if they're able to establish some sort of legitimacy, then obviously that information will be taken into account. Every individual case is going to be different. Every scenario is on a case by case basis. There's no really one size fits all approach.
Can I throw out one more question, please? This is Susie.
Good morning,
Do
Susie.
most of them have a lot of documents with them? Because it's also hard in their kinds of travels many of them are going through to hold on to their documents or their ID or.
Yeah, I would argue that a large portion, I'm not going to give you a number, but it definitely above 90% of these folks have passports with them. They have a lot of documentation. They have backpacks, cell phones, clothing. They have a lot of belongings. And yeah, absolutely. They
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Susie, they keep it on their phones now.
Yeah, that's
I
a
have a
help.
question.
There's a lady raising her hand there.
Right, Nina.
I have a couple questions. Going back to when you bring people in and you feed them 3 meals.
Absolutely.
I'm curious what they're fed at each meal.
That is a great question. That's going to vary. I don't know exactly what they're being fed right now here in San Diego sector, but that's going to vary. I started my career in Yuma, Arizona, and I detailed to Tucson sector. And when I was in Tucson, they were getting cheeseburgers and French fries from McDonald's. When I was in Yuma, they were getting burritos. Here in San Diego sector, I haven't been there during the feeding process, so I couldn't tell you. But it's a pretty legitimate meal, and all of it vary. I haven't been to our processing center in a bit. Last time I was there, which was about, and I think I actually helped out with the feeding, was about a year ago. They were getting breakfast burritos, nice warm, freshly made breakfast burritos. And then for lunch, I believe there was another occasion where they were getting breakfast sandwiches. And then obviously there's fruits that are given, oranges, apples, or they have a variety of options in terms of drinks, milk, water, juice for the children. Also get a lot of snacks. We have a lot of snacks that children are given. So it's gonna vary. There are contracting services that we utilize along the entire Southwest border and probably around the country. So it's gonna vary really. And then you also have to take into account funding, right? Funding can change from one year to another. A lot of these services, if they are contracted, those contracts only last 6 months, a year. So then that's also going to impact the type of food that they're being fed because of who it is that we're purchasing those meals from.
Okay. And my second question, when are people being held outside? And how long are they being held there at the wall, between the walls there?
Your question was, why are people being held outside?
I said when, I don't know why or when, how long are they held there?
No one is being held outside. Anybody and everybody who enters into the country, I shouldn't say everybody, most people that enter into the country do so on their own accord. They do it willingly. They do it with the help of a smuggler. So they'll get in contact with a smuggling organization who they will pay a fee to from their country of origin, who will aid them in getting here to the United States and who will aid them either coming up and over the border infrastructure system, routinely referenced as a wall or a fence or what have you, with a ladder, some sort of makeshift ladder. Or we do have gaps in our fencing, so sometimes those migrants will funnel to those points. So once they make entry and our agents are able to detect their entry via some sort of technology, some sort of infrared camera or some sort of sensor activation, or maybe it's just our agent patrolling who happens to come across the group, then a transport unit will be called out, an immigration inspection will be carried out. And if those folks are found to be inside the United States unlawfully, then they will be taken into custody and transported to a processing center where the processing pathway will begin. But we aren't holding folks out in the field intentionally by design. We don't have any detention centers out in the open. All our detention centers are the biggest detention center we have here, and it's a central processing center. Really, is our soft-sided facility, and it's indoors. It's not outdoors. So folks are choosing to wait outdoors if they are.
Outside the wall is what I was asking.
Yeah,
on the other side of the wall.
That's on their own accord. Those are the smugglers that are telling them to either go up and over, or aiding them in going up and over the border barrier and having them wait there, or they are again finding a funnel point, a gap in our border infrastructure, and telling them, the smugglers will tell them, go wait there. Border Patrol will eventually see you. Once they do, then they will take you back to their station and process. But we aren't holding them. And with that, obviously, when we make the detection, when we're able to identify that those folks are there, then our law enforcement mission, right? Because we are a law enforcement agency first, that changes to the humanitarian mission, and then now we have to go rescue those folks, because while a large portion of the folks that we are apprehending are adult males, there are some women and children that we are still encountering. So it's important for us that no child is dehydrated, or no women be left out in the cold or unfed, right? It's important for us to transport these folks back to our central processing center where they are safe, because more often than not, smuggling organizations will take them out in the middle of nowhere, out in the remoteness, out through the mountains, the hills, and try and guide them through those areas. So it's a lot safer for them to be at our processing center, where they're able to receive meals, where they're able to get blankets, where they have access to medical care. So I just wanted to make it a point that we aren't holding them out there. The smugglers are the ones that are gearing them towards those locations, and the ones that are having them wait there.
All right, so Nina lives in New York and comes here to help. But last December, November, in there were quite a few people between the fences, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
we
the
were at
reality is
Whiskey 8.
the
We were at
reality is that we
Whiskey
have
8. There were people waiting there.
the reality is that we have limited resources. We our border patrol stations, when they were designed. Well, let me back up a little bit. The United States Border Patrol's inception occurred on May 28th of 1924 to address prohibition. Back then, the people that were smuggling alcohol through the northern border were predominantly adult males. And so after the establishment of the Border Patrol, the stations that were created, our holding facilities are small at our stations. The Border Patrol was never designed to house folks for an extended period of time and to house folks in the hundreds. Last year, I told you, good folks, this morning, that last year we were an all-time, well, I didn't mention this, but I'm going to mention it now. We're an all-time record high number that we haven't seen in a very, very long time. I don't even know that we've ever seen 2 million apprehensions along the entire country. So that was in fiscal year 2023. So when you have that many people entering a country, and you have a workforce that only has approximately 19,000 agents, specifically here in San Diego, we only have about 1,900 agents. We have 3 shifts. We have to account for days off. We have to account for the holding space that we have, or lack thereof. The transport vans that we have, the remoteness of these areas. We're not able to, we don't have enough resources to finalize, or to summarize, to make a long story short. We don't have the adequate resources given the amount of entries. It's just, it doesn't, 1,800 agents is not enough for, I think last year, I had the number here somewhere. I think last year we had 120,000 apprehensions, if I'm not mistaken. No, that's not right. Well, currently we're sitting at unofficially 120,000 apprehensions here in San Diego sector. We only have 1,800 agents, so that's a lot of people coming into the country. That's a lot of people that we have to house, that we have to feed, that we have to transport, that we have to make sure are medically evaluated, that our agents have to pat down out in the field to make sure they aren't bringing any weapons, that our agents have to inventory their belongings. So it's not an easy task. And if you did see people out there waiting, they were waiting on their own accord. They were waiting because we did not have enough space to house these folks. We did not have the transportation capabilities to get them from the field back to a station or the processing center. So if those folks were waiting there, it was for that reason. And again, they're coming across the country, again, being guided by a smuggler, and they're waiting there because that's where they want to wait. They know that they're, once they enter the country and we process them, we give them their documentation. More often than not, you notice, to appear before an immigration judge, that court date is, depending on where they're going, is 5 years to 10 years out potentially. If they're going to New York City, the courts in New York are backed up probably closer to 2029, 2031 is the soonest that they'll be able to see an immigration judge or potentially an asylum officer at times. And so once we give them their paperwork, once we process them, they are now in the country lawfully. And it doesn't take very long for word to spread. So once 1 or 2 people do it and they're able to get into the US, and there's also a lot of aid for these folks out there, then it doesn't take them very long to get on the phone and call their family back home or their friends and say, hey, this is what I did. This is how I got into the US, and I am here now. I found a job. I have a place to live. I've established myself. And so those are the challenges that we're up against. And if you were here last year, ma'am, and you saw that at Whiskey 8, well, that was one of the reasons. There was also the Title 42, right? The lapse of Title 42 that was approaching. So you also saw a lot of folks that were entering the country prior to the expiration of Title 42 because they didn't know what was going to happen. There was a lot of misinformation out there. There was a misconception by the migrants of what exactly would happen. Would they still be able to enter the US and what have you once we started enforcing Title 8 again? So it's a immigration is a very complicated issue. It's not an easy issue. It's not an easy area of the law to work in, but as an organization, we do the best job that we can with the resources that we have.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now Jim's next, and he's the same. He comes with Nina. They come from New York. So go ahead, Jim.
Morning, sir.
Thank you. Good morning. I had a question on the open air detention sites, and I think Nina Douglas is going to follow up on this because she's very familiar with Whiskey 8. I'm hearing a very different story from the folks out at Hakumba that the migrants are being told that they cannot leave. The humanitarian organizations are there building shelters for them, feeding them, making emergency EMS calls. A couple of people have died, including an 8-year-old boy. And I've heard that there are 2 new open air detention sites being planned for Otay Mesa. So I'm wondering if you can address what the situations are out in those open air detention sites, because they're out there for more than 2 days on occasion in horrific weather. So I'd like to get an explanation about that, and I'm sure other people here would like to too. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's a great question. There is no such thing as an open air detention site that the United States Border Patrol has created, to my knowledge, yet. Out in Hakumba or in Whiskey 8. If folks are convening there because they know it is a point where the United States Border Patrol patrols, and eventually they will be seen there. If those folks are starting fires there to keep warm, if those folks are being told by the non-governmental organizations or by the smugglers to wait there and Border Patrol will eventually get to them, then that is something that is out of our control. If we held folks in any location, there are Fourth Amendment issues with that, right? Now, if we tell folks to wait there, they are in custody. Once we start giving folks orders, they are in custody. And so there are legal challenges with that. And to my knowledge, we don't have any open air detention centers out in Hakumba, out in Whiskey 8, out in Whiskey 15 by the water. Those are non-existent. If they are, and we've seen it all over the news, there are folks that are convening there. It isn't because the United States Border Patrol is telling them to go there. It's telling them to wait there. They're more than welcome to wait there if they want, but again, that's something that they are choosing to do, and it's not something that we're relaying to them as an organization. On the contrary, our message to the migrants, our message to everyone is to present themselves at a port of entry. Entry into any country around the world. I've been very fortunate in my life to visit numerous countries around the world. Every time that I visit a different country, if I'm flying there, I'm entering at an airport. I'm entering through an airport. If I've taken a cruiser, I'm entering through a seaport and I'm being inspected. So we encourage anyone who wants to come to the U.S. to present themselves at a port of entry because it's a lot safer there. It's a lot safer to go to port of entry, present themselves before a customs and border protection officer and say, here's my passport, here's my ID. I want to claim asylum. I'm fleeing violence from a spouse, from a government, the lack of economic opportunity, whatever the case may be. They can do that at a port of entry. They can do it safely. When they present themselves out in Jacumba, out in the middle of nowhere, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't put my children in that position, because it's not safe. But it unfortunately has become a lot easier to do that. And unfortunately, through social media, we can't compete with social media. There's a lot of applications out there. You folks are quite savvy. You can look them up yourselves. Everybody knows them. I try not to dabble in social media too much myself, but there's a lot of social media platforms that are advertising this openly and saying, present yourself here, wait there, it'll be a few hours, whatever the case may be, they're going to come get you. And that's how those funnel points are and have been created. The one central processing center that we do have here is in Otay Mesa, like you mentioned. Immigrants are taken there, the migrants are taken there once we take them into custody, and that is where we are currently processing everyone. And that is where there's plenty of bed space, there's plenty of shelter, there's food, water, medical aid. We have a lot of amenities, if you will, there. And that is where we take folks once we've taken them into custody. But these folks waiting out in Jacumba, at Power Tower 177, out at Whiskey 8, wherever it may be, that is not anything that we are doing. We did think of the legal ramifications if we were doing that. So that's unfortunately that's misinformation, sir.
Yay.
Okay, Nina Douglas.
Hi, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Good morning.
Agent Moreno, thank you for being here. And I feel really glad that I can be here as well. A year ago, October, as a member of Friends of Friendship Park at the most western point of the border wall where it goes into the water, I was with a group of people and we observed between the primary wall, which is the border wall between our countries, and then the secondary wall that creates this corridor that Border Patrol works within, we saw a small group, maybe 10 or so, of migrant men. And what became clear over the coming hours and day was that Border Patrol was not allowing them to leave, was not allowing us to give them food or water. People were giving them food and water through the Mexican side. They were there at least a day, and that stuck with us. Then the following February, a year ago February, at Whiskey 8, which is a point along the wall behind the San Ysidro, what I call the water mistreatment plant, before you get to the mall, where another site is, there at Whiskey 8, big gate, 30-foot walls, still this double fence. We were there for to do a press conference to talk about the wall, but there were men behind the wall. So myself and some other volunteers took to visiting the wall, these areas more often. And what we discovered back in April, this is a year ago almost, were dozens and dozens of people who had crossed through the first wall, then gotten help from smugglers because they had tried other means, legal means of crossing and hit roadblocks at every step, particularly with the CBP-1 app. So there were men who'd been there 5 to 7 days who were eating leaves. They were not getting enough water. And I began with my husband and another volunteer going to Whiskey 8 behind the water plant. And we would run across the parking lot so we wouldn't be arrested. We were hoping not to be seen as we pushed water through the bars. And then within a few weeks, the media showed up and Border Patrol switched their stance from you may not pass anything through.
He got something, John. Yeah.
All right, please mute, Marcia. Thank you.
So at that point, what began to develop, and this is last May, was a humanitarian aid station. And so I've been present along with some of my friends here who are here today, most days of most weeks for almost a year. and gotten to know a number of Border Patrol agents. And what I will give credit to Border Patrol, in the beginning, there were up to 800 people between those walls, many children, babies. The youngest child I've seen there is 4 days old. Many young children, many people injured either from falling from the wall, crossing through the sewage of the Tijuana River, et cetera. I need to push back a little bit on some of Agent Moreno's accounts, because we were told in the early days over and over, oh, we're giving them food, we're giving them food. No, they were getting 2 small snack bars a day and a small bottle of water, if that. So what has happened over time is that Border Patrol has, after telling us we don't have the ability we don't have the personnel, we don't have the resources to move people more quickly. And so it was taking 3 to 5 days. So these are people out in the sun, in the dirt, in the porta potties. Over time, our humanitarian aid station has stepped up, never with money from any government entity. And Border Patrol has stepped up to a certain degree in terms of transporting people more quickly. But I think it's important for everyone on this call to understand that you can go there today and you will see people behind the wall. I have to respectfully disagree. I have countless times seen Border Patrol say, what are you doing over there? You need to be over here. You're a single man, you need to walk up the hill. And I've also had Border Patrol agents tell me that back in March or April a year ago, there were up to 1,000 people at another outdoor open air detention site called Spooner Mesa, which you cannot view from any location there. It's west of where we are. And there I was told by agents, up to 1,000 men were being kept there, and basically Border Patrol was told, or the agents are being told, we don't want people to see what's going on. So, and eventually those people did start being allowed to come down to the Whiskey 8 area. So I just feel it's important to convey that for people to understand that as volunteers there on the ground every day, particularly through the rainy season, and we had a flash flood there, we see a lot of sick people. I think I agree with many Border Patrol agents who say we need more help. And absolutely more help is needed. It is dangerous there. We have ambulances come almost every day taking people out. Families are separated. Once people are taken, and now it seems to take maybe between 4 to 12 hours, I would say, rather than several days, for people to be patted down and put into the vehicles and taken by Border Patrol. What I would ask Agent Moreno is, I've also volunteered. I'll back up. So the County of San Diego contributed a total of $6 million for the establishment of a welcome center, so that people, after they were processed, would go to this central location and be provided with help to navigate going to the airport, going to the bus station, how you get a ticket to the next place. Because most of the people we see, I would say at least half, are not Spanish speaking, and they're not English speaking. They're from all over the world. So they're really quite lost and disoriented. And as Agent Moreno said, they also have been given a lot of misinformation. So they're operating the best they can with limited information. So up until recently, there was a place that Border Patrol vehicles would bring them to after processing, and they would get help to navigate their next steps. But now that money has dried up, and instead of being brought to a welcome center, people are being what's called street released, which means multiple large buses every day drop off disoriented, exhausted people at the Iris trolley station. And my role when I'm a volunteer there is to explain to dozens and dozens and really hundreds of people, here's where you are. You're in San Diego, you're at a trolley station, there's no bathroom, there's no place to charge your phone, there's no Wi-Fi. let's help you get to another trolley station where there are some more resources. And from there, there's a free shuttle to the airport. So you can imagine how complicated that is. And so my question would be, could Border Patrol, instead of dropping people at this more remote trolley station where there are no amenities and volunteers who are really overwhelmed, drop them off either at the Old Town Station where there's more resources, there's bathrooms, or bring them straight to the airport where, again, we've also have volunteers there helping people. So that I would think would make a significant difference in the journeys for people. And the vast majority are not staying in San Diego. They're trying to meet up with family members across the country.
Ms. Douglas.
Thank you. Okay, lots to answer here.
Ms. Douglas, you made a lot of great points, and you had some good questions. So yeah, so one of the things that Ms. Douglas mentioned was that that folks were being told by Border Patrol agents, or specifically at Whiskey 8, to not mix adult males, to not mix with children, right? To not go over there. Hey, you're an adult male, go over here. Absolutely. We're not. Once people are taken into our custody, and if the migrants that are aided by the smugglers are getting ready to be apprehended by Border Patrol agents, if we have enough resources to go out there and actually encounter those folks, then yes, absolutely. Once Border Patrol agents go out there and start making contact with those folks, with the migrants, start carrying out their immigration inspection, then yeah, absolutely. Then they are in our custody. And then at that point, we do have the responsibility to make sure that we keep children safe. So like you mentioned, Ms. Douglas, yeah, we're not going to let males mix with children if they're not part of the same family unit. We're going to separate males and keep males with males. We're going to keep women and children together with women and children for the safety of the children and of the women until we're able to identify who is who. Because when you have 2 million people coming into the country, you don't know who these people are. And we're certainly not going to be able to find out who these people are in the field. We need to make sure that we're able to keep our agents safe as well as these family units safe. Once we transport them back to the processing center where we have all of the amenities, then and only then will we start identifying who these people are. They'll start the immigration processing pathway. They'll get their fingerprints rolled. They'll be medically evaluated, like I mentioned earlier. Their information will be put into our databases. And that's when our actual care and feeding begins, right? It begins the moment that immigration inspection is carried out. The other thing is you mentioned that these people were given snacks on the field. We are human beings. We are people at the end of the day. I have a wife and children at home. When I go home, at the end of the day, at the end of my shift, I am a person. I go to church on Sundays. I volunteer as an assistant coach on my son's little league team, and I try to do the best that I can to keep my community safe. So absolutely, I don't want these people to die. And even though a lot of agents have been provided legal counsel and have been told not to feed these folks when they're out there, not to give them any water and any food from a legal standpoint, because once we do that, then they are in our custody. That does not mean that numerous agents would not give them snacks. Oftentimes, like you mentioned, Ms. Douglas, snacks, cookies, water, oftentimes our own lunch. Why? Because I don't want, at least me, Angel Moreno, I don't want any person dying that I could potentially help. Right. So if in those instances, Ms. Douglas, that you mentioned where migrants were being given snacks, maybe children, yeah, absolutely. Does it happen? Absolutely. But they, again, those folks, they are not in our custody, and that's the reality. They are there by their own accord with the aid of a smuggler, and they're there because they know that once we do take them into custody and we do take them back to the processing center, then we are going to process their case, and then they will get their legal paperwork to go upon their way. Additionally, if there were a lot of folks that were waiting out there, yeah, absolutely. The numbers are out of control. The numbers, I've been a Border Patrol agent for 13 years. I've never seen these types of numbers in terms of encounters in my 13-year career. That doesn't mean that they haven't happened before, years ago. Maybe we weren't keeping track of them, but in the last 20 years, it's been a long time since we've seen these types of numbers. So we are primarily a law enforcement agency. That is what we are first and foremost. Public safety is our primary focus. The United States Border Patrol was never set up to do the job of asylum officers or social workers. We're not medical personnel. We are first responders, and a lot of our agents are EMTs. Some of them are paramedics, but yeah, we're absolutely not. We're never designed to take care of women and children. We were designed to arrest adult males that were involved in smuggling or that were entering the country unlawfully, that were backpacking narcotics out through the East Desert. So that is what we were designed to do, and that has always been our primary focus. We have a law enforcement mission. That doesn't mean that when we see women and children entering or somebody dying out in the field, that we won't switch and go into that humanitarian aspect of our agency's mission. But primarily, we need to be out there catching the bad people that are trying to get away from us, because we have had a lot of gotaways. And from a law enforcement standpoint, from a national security standpoint, that's what's important to us and should be important to us. Why are people trying to get away when a lot of people can just simply turn themselves in and wait a few hours, 6, 8, 12, whatever the case may be, and then we will take them back to the station, process them, and with the notice to appear, and release them on their own recognizance? Why are people still trying to get away? And from a law enforcement standpoint, from a public safety standpoint, that is what keeps most agents up at night. And that is really what we should be doing, is trying to go after those folks that are getting away, or trying to get away. Additionally, if we have a fentanyl crisis going on in the country, it's important for us to be interdicting those narcotics that are smuggled into the country. The San Diego and Tijuana corridor is the busiest corridor for narcotics smuggling in the entire country. There's a huge portion of fentanyl that comes in through this corridor, and San Diego Border Patrol accounts for, I think it's somewhere close to 50% of the fentanyl that is seized by the United States Border Patrol is seized here in the Tijuana San Diego corridor by our agents. So it's important to make note of those things, so that we aren't painted in a light where we are these evil people that are out there not trying to do the best job that we possibly can. We are human beings at the end of the day, and our agents do the best job that they can. But when we're seeing record numbers, it's hard for them to go in and day out, and carry out the mission, with 120%, at 120% accuracy. They do the best job that they possibly can, but it's a challenge. You mentioned I think it was $6 million that the city had. SB 54, Senate Bill 54, or State Bill 54 here in California, makes California a sanctuary state. Historically, since that bill was enacted, the state of California, no city or municipality has wanted to work or is even able to work legally with the United States Border Patrol on immigration-related issues. It's very hard to get support from the city or the state. I'm glad that the city and the state, given that it's a sanctuary state, has started allocating resources to help us. You're absolutely right in saying that these people are not staying here in San Diego. They are simply transitioning through here, and more often than not are going to different funnel points within the United States. They aren't staying here, but we are resource depleted, and we are doing the best job that we possibly can with the resources that we have. Lastly, 2 points. We are seeing mostly adult males. That is what we're currently seeing. It isn't a lot of family units currently, given the current operational tempo. I don't know what you saw last year when you were here, ma'am. You mentioned Friendship Park at Whiskey 15. There may have been more family units at that time, but currently we're seeing mostly here in San Diego sector, we're apprehending mostly adult males. And lastly, as far as the drop-off points, again, we're resource constrained. I unfortunately don't make these decisions, but it's important to reach out to your constituents to see if and where we can make some of those adjustments to potentially shift those points of drop-off. Those decisions are made by the command staff here at the sector level, by the command staff in Washington, D.C., at our headquarters level. And there's also the operational needs of the organization, right? It's important, given, again, the amount of influx that we have of migrants that are presenting themselves to us, that we expedite these folks as expeditiously and as humanely as possible, because there are legal challenges with, again, Fourth Amendment challenges with how much time we have these folks in our custody. So all of those things are important to consider in analyzing the totality of the circumstances that we currently face ourselves with them. But that was a great question and some good points that were brought up.
How much fentanyl do you find on migrants?
Yeah, really.
Primarily narcotics is smuggled through the ports of entry. But I started my career in Yuma, Arizona. And back then, I personally apprehended 2 folks that were backpacking methamphetamine in between the ports of entry. What the smugglers did in that particular scenario is they pushed somebody off the ladder, and then there was 2 other migrants that came up and over with backpacks. And when I apprehended them, patted them down, found meth. Eventually, I mean, it was a white powdery substance that packaged in bundles. But when we took them back to the station, it was methamphetamine. So what we're seeing here at the funnel points where these migrants are presenting themselves, Whiskey 8, Whiskey 15, Jacumba Springs, as you folks mentioned, is people that are turning themselves in. If fentanyl is a narcotic, a dangerous one at that, that is killing people and that has a harsher legal consequence when apprehended in the possession thereof, then I would argue that a lot of that is potentially coming in through the remote areas, but primarily at the ports of entry, because the reality is that we cannot account for what we don't see. And remember, I mentioned those gotaways. So it's important to take into account what those folks may be carrying when they are getting away. We don't know. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know what they're bringing in. We don't know who they are. There's no way of tracking what we're unable to see.
Okay, is that Penny up there? Yeah.
It is. A couple of questions. I don't know if you can answer it exactly, but what percent of folks that are coming in have family members actually in the US? And I presume if they do, then the focus is to get them to the family as quickly as possible. And those that do not have anyone in this country to support them, what happens with them exactly, Dan?
Absolutely. Those are great questions. So the question was twofold. So yeah, absolutely. We try, family reunification is important to us, right? Everybody that is taken our custody generally has somewhere that they're going in the country, a family member, a friend, or a sponsor. So we do try and identify who those people are. As far as percentages, I couldn't give you a number. I would argue that a large percentage of folks already have some sort of base here, which is why we see a lot of these different populations from the different nationalities going to New York, going to Chicago, going to LA, because they have a foundation there. There's already a base of Venezuelans, of Cubans, of whatever nationality, Chinese nationals, which we've seen a large increase here in San Diego of. So yeah, there's a large percentage of folks. The folks that don't have a family member, if they're adults, well, a large portion of folks that we process are being released on their own recognizance. It's up to them to find a place that they are going to. But I would argue that more often than not, they do have a place that they're going to. When they are in our custody, if they are being set up with a notice to appear, we give them a lot of information. We give them a list of legal services that are pro bono. So if they have no money, right, they can utilize those services. And there are other non-governmental organizations that have recently visited our sector headquarters here that are interested in aiding some of these folks post their release. So I think one of them is the Office of New Americans. And they are a non-governmental institution, from what I understand, that tries to help get folks set up once they are here in the country. But yeah, as far as percentage numbers, I unfortunately do not have a number for you. It's not something that the United States Border Patrol tracks. Again, we're a law enforcement agency. We do get asked certain questions in that regard, processing and what happens after release, how many folks actually show up to their court appearances, how many folks actually are able to attain asylum, because everybody can claim it, but how many of the migrants actually are able to receive that relief. So those aren't numbers that we track. There are different agencies within the United States government that do track those numbers, but we do not, and I unfortunately do not have those numbers for you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, Robert's on. Robert Vivar, do you know him?
I do not. Good morning.
Good morning, Agent Moreno. Glad that.
And really quick, Robert, sorry to interrupt you. We got time for one, maybe 2 questions. I do have another meeting here. I have until 10 in the morning, so I just wanted to.
I'll make it real brief. First of all, we're glad that you're here with us today, obviously.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Just a couple of observations. Part of the reason that we're seeing that influx of migrants is that because we don't get enough slots on CBP-1 for folks that are seeking to enter the country because of protection issues. And the other part is that many of the folks that are arriving here at in the border region are not able to present themselves to the port of entry because many of them do, once they do make it through immigration, Mexican immigration authorities or National Guard, they're denied to present their claim there at the port of entry. But a good percentage of them cannot even make it to the port of entry because they're being intercepted by Mexican immigration officials or National Guard. And that, of course, if somebody's fleeing for their life and they're desperate, then they're gonna run the risk of searching for human traffickers to help them, get across the border into the in between the two border walls, and that creating, of course, an additional strain on you folks, um, whose primary duty is, as you mentioned earlier, enforcement to keep human traffickers, drug trade from coming across the border. So if we had more slots for CBP-1, perhaps that would alleviate a lot of that excess work that you are all having there in between the ports of entry. I just wanted to briefly mention that because I know for a fact that that's part of the issue. I've volunteered there at Whiskey 8 many times. I'm also volunteering at Iris. So we see all the influx of folks that are coming across. And at the same time, we're with some of the shelters in Tijuana, where we have folks that have been waiting for a CBP-1 appointment for over 6 months. You can imagine the desperation if your life's in danger, your family, and whoever you're fleeing from has already tracked you down to where you're at. What else can you do but risk your life? Coming across that border wall and maybe falling and injuring yourself or through the ocean. It doesn't give you a whole lot of choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are some great points that you bring up. And really quick, I just want to say that if I found myself in the position that a lot of these folks find themselves in, I would do the exact same thing. I'm the son of Mexican immigrants myself. My parents came to this great country because of all of the opportunities that this great country has to offer. But I think it's important to remember that there are laws in place for a reason. And if we're going to have laws in place, it's important to respect them while we can currently enforce them, right? So I just wanted to point that out. But as far as the Mexican government, I can't really speak on their behalf of what it is that they do or don't do. We do have a foreign operations branch here in San Diego sector, actually in the entire country. And those are teams of agents that work with the Mexican government, right? We share intelligence with them and we try to carry out operations to stem the flow of migration in other parts of the world and obviously in Mexico before that unlawful migration gets here to the U.S. Also, I would add that you mentioned that in the some of the albergues, I think the migrant centers there in Tijuana, folks were waiting up to 6 months. The point or the purpose of the CBP-1 app is to try to claim asylum in your country of origin. Utilize that app in your country of origin and wait for your turn to then present yourselves at the port of entry and then make that claim. And I understand that you mentioned that some of these folks are fleeing for their lives. Let's use, I don't know, let's use Brazil as an example. Brazil is a huge country in South America. There's a lot of different cities where folks can go. They don't have to stay in their city or in their state that they live in. During the trajectory of their travel here into the U.S., through South America and into the United States from Brazil, there's a lot of other countries that those folks could go to and that they traverse through where they can legitimately claim asylum if they are fearing some sort of persecution in Brazil. They have to go through Venezuela, Colombia, Guatemala, Honduras. There's a lot of other countries where they can potentially wait those 6 months. They don't have to wait there in Tijuana at one of those migrant shelters. They can wait in another country. The Haitian population is a great example of that. back in 2016, I believe it was, there was a lot of Haitians that were coming here into the U.S. A lot of folks tried entering into the U.S. A lot of folks made it, some didn't. They were removed, and a lot of those folks now live in Tijuana, Mexico, and have been able to establish legitimate businesses through their hard work, through the offerings of the Mexican government, right? The different opportunities that they have for people to establish businesses from the ground up through maybe some of their taxpayer dollars or donations, whatever the case may be. So there are a lot of other opportunities that folks can take advantage of in other countries. And so that's what I would say to that. And additionally, we don't have control of the CBP-1 app. The United States Border Patrol does not. That is operated by the Office of Field Operations, the officers in blue at the ports of entry. And the challenge with that is that they are able to meter the amount of folks that they inspect at their ports. So as an example, if they will only inspect here in San Ysidro, let's say 500 people, or that they will allow to present themselves for an asylum claim, then they will only potentially allow 500 at Otay Mesa. Then they shut the entire area down to 1,000, but they're able to meter. And that's for a reason. Again, resources, right? Personnel, the facilities, the bed space, the amount of food. I mentioned contracts earlier on, right? Medical personnel. It's important that when people are in our custody that they're well taken care of so that they don't suffer some sort of, I don't know, detriment due to their health or what have you. So we can't just allow 1,000 people to come in all at once. It's important that we evaluate everyone, that everybody waits in line, that everyone's patted down, make sure they don't have weapons, make sure they don't have narcotics on them, to make sure that they're healthy, to make sure that they're hydrated, that they're fed. So there are a lot of challenges with that. And again, for any specific questions regarding the CBP-1 app, I would have to defer you to the port of entry and the officers in blue. They might be able to better elaborate on that. We unfortunately, the United States Border Patrol does not have any control over the usage of the CBP-1 app and the amount of slots that are allotted on a daily basis. I think currently it might be somewhere along 300 per port of entry, but that's not an official number. That's just one of the last margins that I heard. So.
Right. We understand it very well. The only observation there was that if there were more slots available, then perhaps you wouldn't have so many illegal crossings, and that would allow you to dedicate, your core job, which is law enforcement, to apprehending, the criminal element that.
Absolutely, and I think that is a great point. I encourage you, all of you folks, to go to your constituents and harp on that point, because at the port of entry, again, everything can be metered and funneled through there. So there's a better inspection process, and that, again, as you mentioned, sir, allows us to alleviate our personal resources to go out there, the agency, the United States Border Patrol, and go out to the deserty areas, or even to the maritime environment, which I did not even talk about today because, unfortunately, because of lack of time, I have another meeting to get to. But the maritime environment is wide open, and we are also responsible for it. There are a lot of narcotics and people that are being smuggled through there, and unfortunately lives that are being lost because some of these folks don't know how to swim. They aren't being given life jackets by the smugglers, yet they are being charged up to $20,000 for the smuggling via that particular domain. So it's a never-ending conversation. We could talk about this for days, and there's a lot of great ideas out there. I do think these conversations are important so that we can kind of bridge the gap and try and come up with some sort of at least at our level, some sort of ideas and potential solutions for such a complicated issue.
Do you have other solutions you could tell us about or ideas?
I actually have to go, ma'am, because I have another meeting to get to.
Could you maybe email them to me?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That's something I could do. But I did want to really quickly thank each and every one of you guys. Well, first of all, you, Ms. Bloom, for giving me the opportunity to be here with you folks, and every one of you for allowing me to take part in the discussion. If you folks are here local, I know that you do have a chapter here in San Diego. I'd be more than glad, or somebody here in the office, to go out, and it's probably easier for us to go to you than it is to have you guys come to us, just because of how busy we are. But yeah, if that's something that you guys are interested in, I'd be more than glad to speak at one of your conferences.
Terrific. Okay. This has
Thank you
been
very
so
much.
informative.
So
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you folks.
Appreciate
Have a
it
good
so
day,
much.
okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Well, you heard it, and this is every time we meet with them, we hear some things that seem to conflict what we see on the ground. So there's nothing we can do about it, but we're very fortunate to have him spend an hour with us. Okay, there are a lot of things in the chat. People who are separated, families separated, El Ultralado is helping them. And also they are often sent to Jewish family services or Catholic charities, shelters, until they can find the rest of their family. Sometimes the person, one of them is sent to detention in Louisiana or someplace distant. We had that situation in our church, and we had 4 people from China, and one was in Louisiana or someplace, but he came back, and so I don't know how successful they are at reuniting them, but I think pretty well. Nina Douglas, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh. And I had just that we know from Alotoado and others that there are in fact these 2 additional sites now, open air detention sites. That reunification does take a long time. Yeah, I'm still collecting my thoughts, but thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Robert, you here? We got so
I'm
many
here.
people. Okay. Would you like to give us an update, please?
Sure. Just before I do that, the question that you asked regarding family reunification, even though there isn't a set structure, folks at Al Otro Lado and IMDEF and some of the volunteers are still doing a fantastic job in locating family members that have been separated. We still have really good communications with JFS and Catholic Charities to track down families as the family members are being street side released. And reason I know is because I'm on several chats where this information is constantly crossed, and family reunifications are taking place. Again, Al Otro Lado, IMDEF, and the volunteers there are doing an incredible job in conjunction with JFS and Catholic Charities.
Before you start, Robert, I just want to say we will be putting this video on the League's LWVSD website. It takes a few days, but it'll be a YouTube. So that's where you can find it. Okay, Robert, go.
Could I say
Oh,
something, Beryl?
Yeah, sure.
He had to run, but he said early on, I have a family. I would never put my family through this. He also said that how he goes to church every Sunday. I guess I would say there's a old expression of there, but for the grace of God go I. And it's something I wish I could have said to him. I was trying to get it in there, but he had to go and I had taken enough time. So I think that's important to remember.
Yeah. Well, these people have to follow instructions. I mean, a lot of people at work have to follow what they're told, and that's probably conflicting with his own values. And he's in communication. He's not out in the field.
Yeah, and what you just mentioned is very true, and he mentioned it. They have to, it's their job. They have to do their job in a certain manner. But we've seen there at Whiskey 8 how some of them, not all of them, some of them have gone toward their humanitarian side through their morality side, to maybe, I don't want to say bend uh, their work ethics, but seeing that a humanitarian action or a moral action was more important, and allowed it to happen.